So it's been some time since I last made a video about the pre-bridge swapping strategy, and I want to make a new video that's actually really important, so you need to listen up. I'll make it short and sweet and to the point, but I think if a lot of people do a couple of these things incorrectly, they're going to lose a lot of money. So be careful, and the reason I'm making this is to essentially save as many people as I can from losing all that money. So I talked about the pre-bridge swapping strategy in previous videos back when we all thought PulseChain was going to launch in May, around that time or even earlier. But because we've all had so much time to think about this, I think really the tables have turned, the game has changed. And really this is more of a warning, guys, because if you're thinking about doing any funny business, if you're going to try to be smart or quick and time the market or whatever in those first 48 hours before the bridge between Ethereum and PulseChain opens, more than likely you're going to shoot yourself in the foot, okay? Now, back when there was a lot of commotion about this because we all thought it was right around the corner, a lot of people were probably planning on swapping their PulseX for PLS. Now, my reasoning behind this hypothesis is simply because the PulseX sacrifice, number one, lasted many times longer than the Pulse sacrifice did. And number two, a lot of people heard about PulseX first and then heard about PLS after the fact. Basically, the theory is a lot of people got into PulseX that missed out on PulseChain, so a lot of people have these bags of PulseX that they're probably going to want to swap for PLS, and a lot of people are going to probably be FOMOing and rushing to do this in the 48 hours before the bridge. I think that's incredibly dangerous, okay? Now, what I had talked about in my earlier videos, which is probably no longer true or no longer the best idea, is buying HEX instead and waiting for that HEX to get copied over and then using the HEX to swap for PLS. I no longer think this is a good idea, okay? I have changed my mind. I want to be very clear about this because the idea of swapping HEX for PLS has already had so much time to propagate through the community that it's no longer kind of the minority idea. It's just as much of a majority idea as swapping PulseX for PLS. I'm kind of speculating here that so many people feel FOMO for not having any PLS token that whenever PulseChain does launch, they're going to be trying to transfer whatever they have, whether it's PulseX or HEX, and trying to buy PLS using that, but they might be getting terrible, god-awful deals in those 48 hours before the bridge opens because there won't be any USD price. It's all going to be ratio trading. Now, I want to reiterate that the only US dollar reference point that we'll have in those initial 48 hours are the price of HEX pre-fork, or the price of HEX currently on the Ethereum chain. So if you really can't help yourself, and you really just can't help but click some buttons in those first 48 hours, the only reference point you're going to have is roughly the price of HEX before the fork to determine what the price of PHEX maybe should be, and then, by virtue of all the ratios, calculating, what the US dollar price of PLS theoretically is in terms of, that HEX price. And of course, that's only more speculation. There's no reason that HEX on PulseChain should be at the same exact value as it was on Ethereum right before the fork. Now, it might overshoot, it might undershoot. It's going to fluctuate like crazy. There's going to be giant wicks. But I'm worried about a case where you see a bunch of people swapping, 1 HEX per PLS. Now, theoretically, that should never happen. 1 HEX per PLS is a terrible deal for the person buying the PLS, right? Because let's say HEX is even a fraction of what it is now. Like, let's say HEX on PulseChain is 1 penny for whatever reason. You're still way overpaying compared to people in the sacrifice phase of PulseChain that essentially got PLS for $0.0001. So if you're trading 1 HEX per PLS, that's going to be an awful ratio. And I think a lot of people aren't going to understand what these ratios really mean, myself included, especially when HEX is the only reference point. So if you feel like you have to do some pre-bridge trading and you're not competent enough in the math of everything to determine the reference point of HEX pre-fork and then do the calculations on what you're roughly paying in US dollar terms for that PLS or for that PulseX or whatever, then just stay out of it, okay? If you can't do the math, stay out of it, but really even if you can, you should probably stay out of it as well. My best strategy for most people is to literally sit back and do nothing because many of you could lose lots of money making trades and parting with either a lot of your HEX or a lot of your PulseX, which might be worth a lot someday, leaving you having overpaid for PLS. Now guys, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's an easy solution for all this, and it's probably not what a lot of people want to hear. Buy the dip, as we always talk about. New coins almost always sell off in the first few weeks or months. I'm going to repeat that one more time. New coins almost always sell off in the first couple of weeks or months. This is going to be your dip buying opportunity. 1 to 2 months after PLS, when the short-term profit takers take their profit. This is why what I'm starting to speculate on these price charts might look like is a giant run-up in value at first because everybody's overpaying for stuff pre-bridge. So those first 2 days might see a crazy high price wick because people are just making crazy ratio trades that are totally irrational, followed by a slow decline where we shake out all the weak hands or all the people that just want their money back from the sacrifice over the next month or two. And over the next month or two, that dip of those short-term thinkers, when they want to get rid of their bags and sell into your stable long-term diamond hands, that's the generational wealth if you missed the PulseChain sacrifice phase. So be patient, wait to buy the dip after launch, wait till these things actually have a US dollar price, because otherwise you're going to have no way in hell of knowing whether or not you're getting a good deal before the fork. The HEX strategy, swapping HEX for PLS that I had mentioned in earlier videos, in my opinion is no longer viable, and that's why I'm making this warning video. So I hope you guys take the time to listen, obviously like, subscribe, and have a good rest of your day.